Joining us now, Douglas Holtz-Eakin, American Action Forum president and former director of the Congressional Budget Office, and Terry Haines, Pangaea Policy founder. Gentlemen, thanks for being here. Appreciate it. Doug, let's start with you. We were just talking about the prospects of a government shutdown here. We have this conversation on the regular, obviously. What are the prospects this time, and sort of how do you see it playing out in terms of how long it could last, what the crux of the argument's going to be over, et cetera?
Well, I think there's a serious chance of a shutdown, and the reason is that the House and the Senate are way behind schedule, so there's very little time. They're going to have to come to some sort of deal to get a short-term extension of continuing funding or something. The key to a deal usually is to have the White House brokering that deal. And it doesn't appear to my eye that the White House cares a lot about avoiding a shutdown. Number one, they did cancel the $5 billion in foreign aid, the so-called pocket rescission, which many lawmakers feel is, if not an affront to their prerogatives, illegal. And so that's stirred the waters. Had they been worried about getting a deal, they wouldn't have done that. They also called recently for a, quote, clean CR, just extending what we have. That's unpalatable to the Senate Republicans in particular, which it would continue essentially levels of funding dictated by President Biden. And so the White House is not doing anything, on the surface at least, to get a deal between the House and Senate, and they're pretty far apart in their funding levels and composition. So I think we could get a shutdown. Now, what are the stakes there? Well, number one, we've seen in the past that the economics are not dramatic. There's usually a shift of some economic activity until after the government restarts. That usually lasts, say, a week or something like that. And I think that's probably what we're looking at. The bigger stakes are who gets the blame and what does that do to the midterms? Because that would affect the composition of the political power and the ability to check the White House. And that's really what this is going to be about.
Terry, I want to get your take on that last part. Well, first of all, tell us whether you think there's going to be a shutdown. I think you do. And secondly, who is going to get blamed? It doesn't matter. And if the White House is not sort of, throwing its weight around, as we have seen it is more than willing to do, does that mean it's taking that gamble that the American public is not going to blame President Trump if a shutdown happens?
Well, good morning to you both. A couple of things. One is Doug laid the kind of the basics out very, very well in terms of what's about to happen. I'm the guilty party in saying that I think a shutdown's almost certain. I think the reason why is pretty simple. Democrats feel politically that they have to make some huge political show of Trump resistance, and they really couldn't do that during the One Big Beautiful Bill because of the way that the bill goes through Congress, but they can do that now, so they will, and they'll try to maximize. The president's inclined, as Doug says, to want to take up that fight, not only because he wants to have as much political power as possible to cut things, but also because he wants to show markets that he's the one that's interested in debt and deficit responsibility, and the Democrats aren't, which helps him politically as well as substantively. And I saw a lot of reporting this morning about bond markets squirrely about whether or not tariffs are going to remain intact or not. Well, I think tariffs almost certainly remain. So I don't think bond markets have to worry about that. But bond markets are going to get spooked by shutdowns and continued wrangling over spending, unlike in many past years, precisely because they've been so jittery about the large debt and deficit. You take that with the backdrop of what's going on in Britain and France today, it becomes even more acute.
Okay, so put all that together then for us, Terry, in terms of how it plays out, and is the American public and the bond market, for that matter, so accustomed to these shutdowns that the effect might be more muted?
Well, the public and the markets have, for a decade or more now, have been very used to this and think of it as political kabuki theater and brush it right off. Everybody, caterwauls about this in Washington. Doesn't matter to markets. My suggestion is it might matter to markets this time a lot more because we're already seeing, we've seen all spring and all summer into the fall now, concerns about the trajectory of debt and deficit deficit in the U.S. and other developed countries. Well, the markets have largely shrugged off concerns with the U.S., but they're now starting to get jitterier about what's going on in the U.K. and France. My suggestion is that might well follow in October if there is a prolonged either government shutdown or wrangling over spending, because it will give evidence that the United States itself is not serious about this either.
And Doug, let's talk about tariffs for just a moment more, because we do have this legal challenge. As Terry says, he doesn't think it's likely to prevent tariffs from remaining in place. Certainly the sectoral tariffs aren't even affected by this court case. So how are you thinking about the tariff trajectory here and its effect economically?
Well, I think if the courts strike down the IEPA, the International Economic Powers Act, then the Trump administration will replicate their impact some other way. They'll use other authorities to put in place tariffs. So I think you should simply accept the reality that the president has been advocating for tariffs for 40 years, and he's going to put tariffs in place. He believes they're a good idea. So I think that it's interesting that they may not even appeal the decision to the Supreme Court, because to have the Supreme Court take that out of their hands is a more profound loss for the president. So we'll see what plays out. But I think tariffs will be in place. The sectoral tariffs are there. They're going to be more. They can do Section 301 tariffs against other countries on other issues. And so I think the level of tariffs, the president's indicated this is the level he wants, and how he gets there, I think, is the only question.
And Terry, I also want to ask you about the meeting that happened this weekend between Xi, Putin, and Modi, as well as other leaders gathering in China. That happening at the same time that today we learn the U.S. Has taken away Taiwan Semiconductor's authorization to ship essential gear to its chip-making operations in China. So obviously there's all of this backdrop. What does this mean for a U.S.-China deal getting done?
Well, I think it's much, much less likely that any kind of serious U.S.-China deal gets done, and I've been saying that for a couple of months, even before the recent events. You had the China-Russia gas deal today. That shouldn't be a surprise to anybody, but it shouldn't be a surprise because it underscores that Russia, Russia's not Soviet Union redland of the 20th century. It's basically a Chinese client state and beholden to China. And what markets can read out of that, as well as the other meetings and the like, is that China's not interested in helping the United States resolve hot conflicts in Ukraine and the Middle East, and is not very interested at all in trying to reach some rapprochement on trade with the United States. NVIDIA got rope-a-doped essentially on this, and in part to make that point, and that's going to continue for a while. So I find this all to be markets negative for U.S.-China trade, as well as a broader geopolitical markets negative.
All right, gentlemen, always great to catch up with you. Appreciate it. Doug, Terry, have a great one.
And you.
Thank you.